Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. And can I begin by wishing Scotland's men's team the very best of luck as they open the Euro 2024 tournament tomorrow night against Germany. The Tartan Army have travelled in huge numbers to support Steve Clarke and the team, and I know we'll all be cheering them on to success. Presiding Officer, this week during the election debate in Glasgow, Anna McClintock asked John Swinney what he would do to improve Scotland's health service. She spoke about her 93-year-old mother who needed urgent care but waited 6 hours for an ambulance to arrive and then another 2 hours outside the hospital before she was admitted. John Swinney didn't have answers for Anna on Tuesday. So what does he say to her now, and so many other people across Scotland who have found themselves in the same situation?
First Minister.
So before I address the substantive question that Douglas Ross has put to me, can I also record my good wishes to the Scotland's men's team who will play the host Germany in the opening match of Euro 2024. If I can say this to Parliament, it's great to see Scotland back in Europe where we rightly belong. As First Minister, I want to wish Steve Clarke's team the best of luck and wish the huge numbers of Scotland's supporters making the journey a safe and memorable trip. I know the Tartan Army will be an absolute credit to Scotland, and I know the team will be a credit to Scotland because they have inspired so many of us by their success in getting to Euro 2024. And I look forward very much to being present to encourage the Scotland team on Friday evening and to ensure their success on Friday night. Presiding Officer, Mr Ross raises a significant issue to me, and as I indicated in the debate, the television debate the other evening, that I apologise to Anna McClintock for the experience that her mother had had. One of the challenges that we are facing is about the volume of demand for health service utilisation in Scotland. That is also challenging because of the level of delayed discharges that we have in hospitals, which means that our hospitals are operating at very high levels of occupancy. So what we are doing about that is that we are trying to work with local authorities to tackle the issue of delayed discharge, and we've had extensive discussions, I personally, with the leadership of the Convention of Scottish Local Authorities, and the Health Secretary has followed that up to work to reduce delayed discharges and to reduce congestion within our hospitals. And then, in addition to that, we are obviously investing in our health service to an extent that we now have record levels of staffing to ensure that we can meet the needs and the demands of the population within Scotland. But I acknowledge that not everybody is getting the treatment that they require as quickly as they require it, but there is a very focused effort being undertaken within the government, within our health boards, to make sure that can be delivered in all localities in Scotland.
Douglas Ross.
The First Minister has apologised again to Anna McClintock, but there are many more people like Anna concerned for the safety and the well-being of their parents and their grandparents. Anna asked the question, is our NHS broken? That's the point she put to the First Minister and other party leaders, and that's the concern of people up and down Scotland. People who can't get a GP or a dentist appointment, people waiting too long for ambulances or to get into A&E departments, people who need urgent care but they can't get it when they need it. All they seem to get from John Swinney and the SNP are excuses. Don't they deserve to hear the solutions?
First Minister.
I have set out the solutions in my earlier answer to Mr Ross, and the Government is very focused on ensuring the NHS meets the needs of individuals. We all want the NHS to be able to deliver what people require when they require it. And the Government has taken the hard decisions to increase the resources that are available to the National Health Service. Now, if we had, for example, just passed on the consequentials to the health service that had been allocated as a consequence of UK funding formulas, we would have passed on a lower amount of money than we have actually invested in the National Health Service. So we've taken as a government hard decisions about increasing tax on higher earners so we can allocate more resources to the National Health Service. Now, I accept that even having undertaken that allocation of increased resources, there remain significant strains in the National Health Service. So the point I was making on Tuesday evening in the discussion in which Mr Ross and I and others were involved is that what we cannot have as an outcome to this election is a continuation of the austerity of the Conservative government, because that would be disastrous for the National Health Service.
Dr. Ross.
The National Health Service here in Scotland has been under the remit of the SNP and John Swinney for 17 years. Another audience member said to Mr Swinney on Tuesday, "Don't blame elsewhere, take responsibility." And again, we're getting the same from John Swinney. No responsibility for Scotland's NHS. He said it needs to meet the needs of individuals, but it's not. It's so clear to all of us. It is not meeting the needs of individuals. And elderly people are routinely left far longer than they should be for care in our National Health Service. We've got a freedom of information response which shows just how stark this situation is. Patients aged over 100 are some of the most vulnerable in our communities. And in just over a year, hundreds of them have been made to wait beyond the target treatment time in A&E departments. In over 100 cases, people aged over 100 have been waiting more than 12 hours for emergency treatment. These are people over 100 waiting more than half a day to get emergency treatment here in Scotland's NHS. And that's only people aged over 100. Many more elderly people are waiting in agony too. John Swinney must surely agree that is appalling and unacceptable. So what is he going to do to fix it?
First Minister.
As I always indicate to Parliament when I'm responding to questions, I take responsibility for the actions of my government and the public services on my behalf. That is my duty as First Minister, and I do so on all occasions. And the situation that Mr Ross has just recounted, I suspect, is addressed by the fact that our hospitals are operating at such a level of congestion that individuals are not able to be transferred from accident and emergency into wider hospital care because for the simple reason that the hospitals are so congested because of delayed discharge. And that's the explanation of the problem. And the solution to it is what I said in my first answer, which is to work with our local authorities to expand the provision of social care in the community to ensure that we can address the delayed discharge issue. But ultimately, this comes back to the resources that are available to the National Health Service. And I have set out that this government has taken responsibility for this because we have been prepared to take the hard decision on taxation to increase tax and to ensure that we have more resources being allocated to the National Health Service. Now, Mr Ross would be in a stronger position to argue for this if he hadn't argued for me to follow the budget of Liz Truss. That was what Douglas Ross wanted me to do. He wanted me to follow the tax-cutting agenda of Liz Truss. If I'd done that, that would have been catastrophic for the country, catastrophic for the National Health Service, and I'm really glad I didn't do it.
Dr. Ross.
I'd just quite like John Swinney to focus on Scotland's NHS, our elderly patients that are waiting far too long to get the treatment they deserve. And he mentions delayed discharge. I mean, the Cabinet Secretary to his left promised to eradicate it 7 years ago. 7 years ago, the SNP were going to get rid of delayed discharge altogether, and it is still having a huge impact on our NHS now. Now, our FOI only shows the problems within A&E departments and ambulance waiting times. But as we've raised with the SNP many times, there is a crisis at every single level within Scotland's NHS. The number of GP appointments has fallen by 146,000 in the last 3 years. Over the last 10 years, the number of GP practices has reduced in every single health board across the country. In rural areas, they're shutting at twice the rate of urban areas. People across Scotland don't have access to the health care they need and deserve, and that has to change. We already know what will be line 1 of the SNP's manifesto. So just how far down John Swinney's list of priorities will Scotland's NHS be?
First Minister.
Well, the NHS is at the top of my list of priorities, and it's why.
Let's hear the First Minister.
And it's why Scotland has got an accident and emergency system which is the best performing in the United Kingdom, and it has been for the last 9 years. So that's why.
Let us hear the First Minister.
That is why the National Health Service is at the top of my list of priorities. And in relation to general practitioners, we have more GPs per head of population in Scotland than any other part of the United Kingdom, able to provide the care to people in Scotland in various parts of our country. What I'd say to Douglas Ross about priorities is that you can tell how governments act by the resources that they allocate. Yep. And this government has taken the tough decision to increase tax on higher earners so we could invest more in the National Health Service than was proposed by the Conservative government in the consequentials. So what that tells us is the Scottish Government is giving the necessary priority to the National Health Service. And the last thing I would say, Presiding Officer, is this. And Mr Ross asked me about the question of independence, and I will answer his question very directly. Scotland would be in a stronger position to take greater decisions about investment in the National Health Service if we had the full powers of independence to use the resources of our country to create the best future for our country, and I'm proud to represent that position.